Hello. Hello friends. So today I will just discuss about the concept of probability. Actually, what is the concept of probability? The first we will discuss some points, and that points is known as the experiments. We will discuss the following points. Discuss the following points. So what are the following points we have to discuss? And that is first one we have to discuss, that is experiment. What is experiment? What is an experiment? Experiment is nothing but it is a process of measurement or observation in a laboratory or factory on the street in nature. So experiment is nothing but it is the observations, but it is a process of measurement. It is a process of measurement. Process of measurement. So what is outcomes? That is experiment. Some points we have discussed, and one point has the experiment, and experiment is nothing but it is a process of measurement or it is a process of observations in a laboratory or in the street of nature. So next, second point, you have to discuss the outcomes. What are the outcomes? Outcomes, the result of an experiment. The results of an experiment. And these called the outcomes. The results of an experiment is called as the outcomes. So when we discuss the what is the outcomes, then we can say that the results of an experiment is called as the outcomes. And what is sample space? Sample space. Point 3 we have to discuss, that is sample space. Sample space. What is sample space? Sample space means the set of all possible outcomes. The set of all possible outcomes is known as the sample space. The set of all possible outcomes. Possible outcomes. That is called as the sample space. So 3 points we have to discuss. And first point is experiments. What is an experiment? It is the process of measurement or it is the process of observations in a laboratory. And what is outcomes? The results of an experiment. The results of an experiment is called as an outcomes. What is sample space? The all possible outcomes is called as the So we have discussed already the sample space, and sample space which represents us the set of all possible outcomes, and that is called as the sample space. When we can say, suppose first we have to discuss in graphical form, we can say that this you can say here. First we have to check this is some one experiment, and next step we have to discuss and this is sample space. And this is one case. And this is also another case. Just you can see here. The first of all, this is experiments. So at first we have discussed here. This is an experiment. And second, we have discussed that is an outcomes. And finally, we have discussed This is the another case, and that case we can say that the sample space. So all are related to each other. When you can say that's experiment, that means it is a process measurement of observation. It is a process of measurement of observation. After that, the outcomes of an experiment, the outcomes of an experiment के जो outcomes आएगा, and that outcomes is called as the experiment. The results of experiment is called as the results of experiment. Results of this experiment is called outcomes. And the all possible outcomes, all possible outcomes called as the sample space. So when one example, we can say that one example. What is one example? Rolling a dice. Rolling a dice. That what are the 12 possible outcomes of rolling dice? That is the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. These are the rolling dice is an experiment. And outcomes may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And total outcomes is called as the sample space. So that is we have discussed about the experiment, some outcomes and sample space. Next we come to discuss about the event. What is event? Any subset of the sample space is called an event. Any subset of an sample space. Any subset of an sample space. Sample space called an event. So when you can say that any sample space or any subset of the sample space, 1 is also a subset, 1, 2 also a subset, 1, 2, 3 also a subset. So any sample space we have to consider, and that sample space is called as the events. Getting exactly 2 heads, getting exactly 3 number, getting exactly prime numbers, and getting exactly 2 heads, and there is such type of conditions is called as an event. So first of all, we'll discuss the event. Impossible events. Events divided into the categories of the impossible events. And next is impossible event. What is impossible event? Now, impossible event has no elements. Called as impossible event. There is no element. There is no elements. And called as impossible events. Impossible events. There is no elements called as impossible events. And impossible events, especially we can represent as the, let A be the event getting the 7 when a dice is rolled. Weekly 7 days. Weekly 8 days. This is called as the impossible events. Weekly 8 days which mentioned as the impossible events. And impossible events, certain event. What is certain event? Certain event, the event which contains all the elements of the sample space. The event which contains all the elements. The events which contains all the elements of the sample space. So just remember, whenever we question asking to you, what is the certain event? The events which contains all the events which contains all the elements of the sample space is called the certain events. Suppose sample space S when dice is thrown. A dice is thrown. What are the total sample space? Just you can say that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the certain possible outcomes. So what is sample space? Sample space is 6. Cardinal table sample space 6. Events 6. Mutually exclusive events. Then what is next events? Mutually exclusive event. Mutually exclusive events. What is mutually exclusive events? Just we can represent what is the mutually exclusive events. Mutually exclusive events. Yeah. Two events are said to be mutually exclusive if they have no common elements. जब दोनों सेट में कुछ कॉमन एलिमेंट्स नहीं होगा, so that is A and B are mutually exclusive events. That means A intersection B is equal to 5. Then this set is called as the mutually exclusive events. So sample space and complementary events, complement sets, complement of an event, complement of an event. What is the complement of an event? A n plus A complement, that is equal to sample space. So A complement can be evaluated, that is S minus of A. And A intersection of A complement, that must be a 5 because there is no common element is there. A complement of complement, that is a set. A complement of complement, that is equal to A is given that set. Next. So that we have discussed all the sample space events, complement events. These are the just possible experiments. Whenever we express first step is experiment. What is this? First we have discussed this is a step and this is experiment. That is on events. Our first is experiments. Then what is the next result? Experiment. Then we can say next is after experiment. That is outcomes. Outcomes. What is the next? After outcomes. That is called as the sample space. After sample space. That is called as events. That is on events. Then event is termed as the different names. Then event is specially mentioned here. Different type of events is mentioned here. So first experiments to contact with the outcomes. Every one is related to each other. Just you can see here. The outcomes are sample space related है, sample outcomes related to experiment and outcomes related to experiment and sample space related to outcomes and sample space related to outcomes and event related to sample space. Then everyone is related to each other. Then you can see this is a relation. What is experiment, what is outcomes, what is sample space, what is events. Both are parallelly related to each other. And the experiments are categorized here. What are the experiments? Experiments is categorized here. Event is categorized. What is event? And types of events. We can just mention event. What type of events? Impossible events. This is impossible events. Events. Next, certain events. Impossible events. Then we can the certain events. Then mutually exclusive events. Events. Then complementary events. Then properties of the events. So these are the basic concept of experiments, outcomes, and events. Experiments, outcomes, and events of the probability. So we'll discuss this one after the next class.